Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for attending the New York edition of the Future Fabrics Expo. Great to see you here. It's our second year in New York, and we're super excited to be expanding our showcase. So we're going to kick off with an amazing panel tackling product overload. So how can we reimagine the value chain for textiles? Got a fantastic panel here for you today, led by our wonderful Anne from our team, who's going to moderate the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anne. Go.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you guys all so much for coming today. As Amanda said, we're kicking off the Future Fabrics Expo NYC edition. I'm Anne Warren. I'm a member of the Sustainable Angle team and also a recent founder of an upcycled knitwear brand called Next Season. I'm so excited to have our panelists here today. As you guys might have heard in the title, the topic of our panel and the first of our seminar series is about circularity and waste. I'm going to be using my quotes a lot for waste, and we'll get into that. And this discussion is part of a larger vision to position the Future Fabrics Expo as a key platform for cross-sector material waste solutions with our Resolve initiative that's set to launch next year. Through Resolve, we'll be showcasing how invisible waste impacts multiple industries and how we can address these supply chain challenges collectively. And our panelists here today are all pioneers in circularity, and they're working hard to bring circular solutions to the forefront of the textile and fashion industries. So all of you have already taken steps to reframe waste, that's why I'm using quotes, reframe waste to be used as a valuable resource. And I would love for each of you to briefly introduce yourself and give us a quick overview of how you're transforming waste. And Tara, we can start with you.
Thanks, Anne. Can everybody hear me okay? Hi, everyone. So grateful for everyone to be here and to be asked to speak on this. So thank you, everyone, for being here. So my name is Tara Maurice. I work as a design strategist, specifically in the areas of circularity, and the way I really position it is helping people understand and work through the challenges that bind fashion to climate change. I work in a couple of spaces. So I work as a brand consultant and I work as an educator. I teach at Parsons. I teach senior design through a systems pathway that's really systems thinking based. And then my work for brands primarily centers at Coach. And my projects there that focus on waste, circularity, and kind of reimagining what we think of as wasted materials was the original design for what is now Reloved, which was our first circular sub-project, and then ultimately building out the framework for Coachtopia. So as we talk more, I can tell you how those projects deal with the idea of waste.
Amazing, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Åsa. Typically Swedish name, super hard to pronounce. I'm the sourcing manager at Oncemore. So I source end-of-life textiles that goes into our chemical recycling process at one of our mills in the southern part of Sweden. So our product is the very first step in the value chain. So before it becomes a fiber, it's called dissolving pulp. And this dissolving pulp is Oncemore, and is made out of both recycled content that comes from cellulose, from polycotton and cotton, and we mix that with renewable wood that comes from our members' sustainably managed forest, actually. So the product is then being transformed, so we transform the waste that goes into this process, and outcome high-quality material that goes to man-made cellulosic fibers such as viscose, lyocell, and such. So yeah, I can tell you more about this because it's really being the first step with the dissolving pulp. I think that a lot of people don't really know about that step. So yeah.
Great.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Coulter. I am the US Program Manager at Accelerating Circularity. We do a lot of things at Accelerating Circularity, but our main role is to build the systems to scale textile to textile recycling and really thinking about comprehensively the entire ecosystem of textile to textile circularity, so collection, sorting, pre-processing, all the way through to finished product. And in my first couple of years at Accelerating Circularity, my focus really was in developing the feedstocks for those systems. And so my mind has sort of always been in thinking about these materials as resources, not as waste, but really as raw materials. So we'll get more into that later.
Definitely.
Hi everybody, Malvina, Hoxha. I'm the marketing director for Hyosung. So essentially we work directly with brands and retailers, helping them to understand how to source and work with our materials, speaking to the product, sustainability, traceability, and branding and marketing that to the end customer. In terms of a little bit about the organization, so if you're not familiar, Hyosung is a global manufacturer of spandex, nylon, and polyester, $17 billion giant. Within that space, they own and operate 10 different manufacturing facilities, 40 different sales and operations offices. So a lot of what we'll talk about in this discussion is really looking at from really being a commercial and such an important value player within that scope. How do we then take these materials and how do you divert these resource streams in a way that you can bring recycled spandex into the fold in the way that you can bring recycled nylon as well as polyester. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can do it when we're a big player, but also some of the challenges and opportunities of collectively being in this space and working directly with all of the value chain partners to bring these sustainability initiatives to the forefront. So thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thanks, Malvina, and thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. I think, as you guys can probably tell from the introductions, and something that came up in our preparation for this discussion as well, is that we have kind of representation from multiple different vantage points along the textile supply chain. And something that came through, like I said, in this prep was that circularity is super challenging and super complex. It's a really difficult conversation, and there are opportunities for waste reduction kind of at each point of the system that exists, as well as there's also this kind of need for a larger scale systemic change to move away from the linear take, make, waste model to a more circular model. So I wanted to start, Sarah, with you from Accelerating Circularity's perspective, because you work with so many different you're kind of running so many pilots and initiatives around textile to textile recycling. I imagine you have kind of a bird's eye view of this space, and I would love to hear what some of the challenges and opportunities you've seen from where you sit.
Yeah, happy to speak to that. So we spent the first couple years of our existence as an organization running textile to textile system trials, and we learned so much, including what the challenges are. And now we're in the process of scaling that up to really truly commercialize what the successes have been. But certainly there are many challenges. And sort of walking through step by step, I can say, on the raw materials side, aggregation of materials, getting those materials to a place where we're not operating on a batch level every time, it is going to continue to be a challenge for quite a while. Right now we're still doing really bespoke feedstocks for each and every recycler. But I'm beginning to hear inklings of recyclers who are thinking about this from a more systems perspective, which is very encouraging. They want to develop a feedstock that can be used by more than just themselves, which is amazing.
Yeah, super
almost,
exciting.
Jumped for joy when I heard that. Pre-processing, I actually spoke to like 3 or 4 people in this room today about pre-processing and the challenges that presents, particularly for mechanical cotton recycling, which often still gets neglected, I think, in the conversation. I think people are very excited about the advanced recycling conversation, but mechanical recycling, I think, will continue to have a really important role to play in the future, especially given that people just really are always going to like how cotton feels and the way that it performs. Then, you know, I think I probably am not going to shock anyone when I say that market demand is a challenge, and we need to figure out the economics and what the runway is to get the return on all the infrastructure investment that we need to make the model work.
Yeah, just to dig into that a little bit, market demand especially, I think you're probably, while you're supporting multiple recyclers, probably face similar challenges that kind of Oncemore and Hyosung also face on that side. So I'm sure that when you guys speak about the challenges you face, that I can imagine that will come to light as well. I was going to say, Tara, I also wanted to ask you, in your experience, you know, you've been working at a major brand, Coach, and on the Coach Reloved and Coachtopia projects. You know, with these complexities of circularity, how do you speak about circularity to your students, to your peers, to your team leadership, and what are some of the challenges you had to overcome for Reloved and Coachtopia?
Okay, they are many. So I'm gonna zoom us out to like 30,000 feet to help make it clear kind of the challenges in this conversation. So right now in the world today, globally, across all industries, everything. So this lives outside of fashion. The world generates 3.5 million tons of trash per day, solid waste. That number is 10 times the amount that we produced a century ago, and that number is expected to increase 11 times by the end of this century. We have a solid waste emergency on planet Earth, right? And we have designed our systems to generate waste. And they generate waste the entire way through the supply chain. So if you think about cotton, right? So a farmer grows cotton on the ground. He has waste. There's waste involved in his process, right? He deals with this waste. He manages his waste. It's the cost of him doing business. Then the cotton goes to a spinner. The spinner, or it's going to go for, it's going to go through its processes of spinning, refining, turning into a material. At each stage, there's waste. And at each stage, whoever is doing that normalizes that waste. But the waste from each step in the process is not communicated along the chain. So at each stage, there's invisible waste. So we are generating enormous amounts of waste in the processes of making things, and then we're generating more waste as we make things and put them in landfills. And what are the materials that we're talking about? What sits in a landfill? And just so we know, we do two things with our waste. We either bury it in a landfill or we burn it. That's what we do with the 3.5 million tons of waste that we're producing every day. And what's in there? Metal, glass, wood, paper, food, cotton, polyester, all things that had value on this side of the process, and on this side of the process, we're okay to just bury it and burn it. And then it becomes a municipal cost to deal with that. So, to answer the question, I think the first part of working in this space of circularity is radically reshaping how we think about these problems, right? These are systems level problems. And so we have to get people invested and interested in shifting the system. So it's not where we maybe were 10 or 15 years ago when we were talking about sustainability, that we could swap out a material and then the outcomes were going to be different, right? The system is going to produce the waste. It's not about the input of the material, it's how the system operates. So in circularity, you've got to get people, first you have to break that thinking that we have from sustainability, reframe your thinking, and then start getting excited about actually the work is the redesign of the system. How we did that in Coachtopia, and I'll use Reloved as an example because that was like our first step in. You have to do a waste audit. So you have to start finding this waste. Remember, it's invisible for a reason. People don't want you to see the waste, so you have to go find it. You have to dig around and you have to find it. And so we discovered, any business will discover you have multiple waste streams, and that waste sits at different points along your supply chain, some in your control, some out of your control. So first you have to find it, and then you have to look for solutions to either uptake it, transform it, or create another valuable material out of it. I'll stop there because that was a lot. But I think it really just starts with like, we have to radically reshape how we think, and we have to get comfortable looking at things that for a very long time have been invisible to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, I wanted to hear from Hoxha and Malvina as well. Like, from Oncemore's perspective, like, was waste part of the inception of thinking about your product? And then the same for Hyosung, like, how did you go about finding this waste and starting to tackle it? Maybe we can start with Hoxha.
Yeah, I will start to just say that it's exactly as you said, Tara. It's a mindset that needs to be changed. What I think is now is the huge gap between the collecting and sorting of the textiles and then what? Because right now everyone is asking what is going to happen to all the waste. We have a couple of solutions, but we need more. So that's one thing. And also when it comes to the system change, I think that right now it's a huge problem with the waste. But I also think that we need to maybe go back and treat the symptoms of the waste. Because right now it's a waste management problem, and it should be the other way around. So it's, I think it's, I talked to a student from Parsons actually earlier today, and it starts with education. We need a lot of education.
Yeah, and I can add to that. So I think from our perspective, it's, and I agree with everything that Tara and Hoxha mentioned. I suppose, for us, we're so large, right? And the example that I'll give is very specific to the region, spandex portion of the business. So by market share, we produce 33% of the global fiber market that's produced and manufactured through Hyosung. So from that standpoint, right, we realize that when you're in the production cycle and you have this raw material, you have the wastage that's coming off of the production. So then it becomes both the, from an industrial standpoint and operating a plant. This is, if you're a leader and you're operating these facilities, that's a real cost that you have to problem solve for, because now you have all of this byproduct, then you're collecting it, you have to purify that material, and then bringing it back into another life cycle. So that's sort of the exercise that we went through in terms of creating that regen spandex. And so some of the the numbers around that is really looking at 66% CO2 reduction in terms of what we compared from the virgin base to the recycled version. In terms of, I think it becomes another conversation around, yes, problem solving in-house for things that can essentially make us more effective and efficient within our business and operating that well. And then simultaneously, it's another question around getting brands and retailers to understand the value of that. The other piece of this conversation is the performance element. So with recycled materials, recycled content, if you're a brand and a retailer in here, the number one question that you're going to ask me after this is, yes, but does it perform the same as the virgin-based materials? And the second question to that is, yes, but how much? So these are very sort of real pieces to that dialogue. And so again, to Tara's point, is how do we educate ourselves? Both myself and everyone else in this room, right? How do we really educate ourselves to be able to value this? Because right now we think of it as, yes, but you took something that you already had. There was the initial cost of that product was already calculated for, right? And so everybody wants it for cheaper. So it's not about how do we get to the bottom. It's about how do we build more systemic changes that really optimize for better. And so I'll pause there.
I would like to add to that, because I think it's a big misunderstanding that the recycled material should be same price or cheaper actually than the virgin material. And when it comes to the recycled material, it needs to go through many different steps that not virgin material is going through. And on top of that, we have the traceability certifications, and still, the material with recycled content should be cheaper. So that is so wrong.
Yeah, we hear this a lot too, and encouragingly, I'm beginning to hear some really savvy suppliers and brands talking about this in the appropriate way, which is, it's a raw material that has to be developed in much the same way that virgin materials do. But you don't expect a farmer to grow cotton for free. Why would you expect your curbside collector of secondhand textiles to do that for free? Why would you expect the sorters to sort it for free? Why would you expect the people who are cutting off all the trims to do that for free? It all costs money. And then it has to be processed. Cotton ginning isn't free. Neither is, refiberizing a piece of material. Neither is shredding and melting it. All of that stuff costs money.
Yeah, I'll just really quickly, I was going to say last year I was speaking with a New York organization, Fab Scrap. Some of you guys may or may not be familiar, a nonprofit here in New York that takes waste from the design process primarily of fashion brands based in New York. And I was speaking to one of the founders, and she had kind of passed on a quote like, it's one of the great deceptions in a way to think that our trash is free, like even as individuals in our home, that it's just free to throw things away. It's like that's coming out of our taxes, like we are paying for that, but it's hidden. That's invisible as well. That cost is invisible to us. But go ahead, Tara.
No, I was gonna say, in the process that Sarah's describing, think about that curbside pickup, right? Those are systems in place. So when we think about curbside recycling that you have here in New York City to pick up your glass bottle, your soda can, that's a system that's in place. There is no system in place for global textile recycling. The system does not exist. And then think about the complexity of, or the difference in, if I have a soda can, it's one material. It's aluminum. So it's very easy for me to recycle that as a recycler. It's very easy for me to sort it as a sorter. Sorting is actually one of the most critical points in the recycling systems of textiles. So my soda can is aluminum, it's one material, and there's a resale market for it. So that makes it worth the expense for a city like New York to invest in the system to take that can back, because they can sell it. Think about your sneakers. Think about a handbag, right? There's glue, there's mixed materials, there's EVA, there's foam, there's all these materials in very small amounts. So if I'm gonna sort it, separate all those materials to get very tiny value back from it, the product doesn't want to recycle. That's not a product that wants to recycle. So we've built clothes that don't actually want to recycle. So the recycling part is complex. There's not a system for it. And in truth, we have to always remember, reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle comes last. Recycle comes last. You do not solve an overproduction problem by recycling at the back end.
This is such an important point, and I think one of the ways that I talk about this issue a lot to people who are just like, well, why don't we just put a deposit on our clothes? It's like, well, it's because clothes have the complexity of electronics and the value of PET bottles. And so that model just doesn't
That's
work.
a really good one.
That's a great analogy.
Work.
I'm gonna borrow
You can't
that.
do it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's super complicated. I'm curious, Tara, within Coach Relove and Coachtopia, especially, I think you were working with sort of textiles and materials further down the supply chain than the sort of suppliers that are on the panel here. How did you guys go about sourcing your materials, and kind of was disassembly involved? What was the process?
Okay, so let me speak to Coachtopia, which, show of hands, do people know what Coachtopia is? So Coachtopia is a sub-brand of Coach. It is meant to be an end-to-end circular lifestyle brand. So when we began the original process of building out the framework. Like, how is this thing going to work? Like, we literally had to like map it, where these materials come in, and our the woman who heads the brand was very clear: 100% recycled in, must be recycled on the back end out. Like that, those were the guardrails that she set for us. Very hard guardrails. I'll give you one example of the kind of like investigation through your supply chain that you have to go to. At Coach, we have because of our size and scale and the amount of leather that we produce around the world, we have a extraordinary visibility into our supply chain. But that visibility really takes us to the stage when a skin is prepared for tanning, right? So prepared for tanning before. What we learned, and this was sort of fascinating and interesting for all of us, is before that stage, when the leather is in a state called wet blue. So this is before you tan it, before you're retanning it, before you're putting color and finishing on it. At that stage, there's a lot of waste. So I have the skins before they're tanned. If I'm a tanner, I don't want to tan a skin that's not gonna be beautiful on the end out, right? Like, that's a cost and expense to me. So there's a lot of trimming, right? We trim the wet blue. There's wet blue scraps. Think of this as like the leather fiber, but before there's any color or texture. The amounts, I'm going to get this number wrong. Around the world, lots of it. Millions of tons per year of this waste. No value, goes straight to landfill. We are working with, we'll call them textile mills, because it's really not tanning, it's not leather, but we are working to take that waste byproduct, grind it into a fiber, apply it to a textile, and then applying leather-like coatings on top of that. So that's an example of literally taking waste, a waste product that was headed straight for landfill, and creating a new material from that waste that is leather-like. And in our model, this is a problem that needs to be solved, because it is, we work in the leather goods industry, and so this is like, this is our space. But we would have never kind of discovered that, again, remember, because of like the invisible waste. There's no reason to talk about this wet blue scrap if you're the person producing it. It's just, it's waste, it's the cost of doing business. So that's what I mean when you have to like just know that there is invisible waste throughout any process. Front end, back end, pre-consumer, post-consumer, industrial, there's waste all over the place. And so you really have to kind of take a guess at where you think there's going to be value for you as a brand or as a producer, and you just have to dig deep. You really have to put your Miss Marple hat on and do some investigation.
You mentioned when we were kind of prepping for this, and I'm curious, it might apply to others as well, so I'll be curious the rest of your all's take on this, but something that came up, Tara, that you said that a huge part of this initiative was really having leadership buy-in, and you even said that
matters.
With that, the guardrails as well. But I'm curious, kind of for the rest of the group, how has both education and that sort of like, how has education and leadership kind of helped drive this forward, or where are you seeing opportunities or like gaps essentially to help tell that story? And you talked about price. I know that's a big challenge.
Yes, I can start.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's kind of lobbying to all of you.
No, it's a lot to say about that, of course, but I think that for us it's more what I experience more or less every day. We need more education. Probably already talked about that, but that is really needed to get people to understand the complexity. Because Tara, you talked about leather, and for us it's textiles, and I was at a different congress, and it was a super smart person that said that there's no such thing as 100% cotton, and I sort of agree with that, because it's always something else blended with it. So I read something in a report recently that it's probably around 60% of all the textile that's being waste is 60% is a mix between different kinds of fibers, and that makes it also really difficult to recycle in different ways, not only chemical but also mechanical or. So we have a long way to go, we need to to do this together, because I think it's what I think is important to understand is that we are all in this together, in this sustainability world that we would like to work with. So we need to do it together.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I mean, I definitely wanted to spend a few minutes on this panel talking about how, you know, one of the major goals of the Future Fabrics Expo is to really serve as like a visibility of solutions, like solutions that are already out there and what we can learn from them. And, you know, here's our chance to kind of educate a little bit on that. I would love to hear maybe Malvina, and we can all take a turn because honestly, I think you all have things to share about, you're sorry to...
Go for it. You wanted that one. Go for it. I'll follow up after you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So we need solutions, but we also need to kind of sit for a minute in the complexity and the mess. This is like really, really messy. And I think it's also important to take a beat and like allow us to just kind of sit in like, we're 4 people kind of talking about the same thing on a panel. If we got down into the weeds, we're all doing very, very, very different things. This is complicated stuff. It's messy. It can be really scary, right? It can be frightening. So part of what we have to do is capacity building for people to be able to kind of like sit in the mess and sit through the discomfort and like, I don't know, it's like an imperfect science. Like those are sort of important things to do. And I would say related to the leadership question, leadership matters. So figure out who the leaders in your organization are, spend time with them. And I think there's another part about like allowing leaders the grace to also bring them along on a journey if they perhaps don't know, because this stuff is it's weedy and it's intense. So yeah, I would say like solutions are great, but like you got to be in the headspace first before we get to solutions. And some of the things that are solutions today, given a year or two, may not appear to be the solutions of, you know, the next couple of years. So that's my thought on solutions.
Absolutely.
Can I just add something about that? So one big project that I worked on the last couple of years that was outside of the trials was really mostly research, but it had a practical on-the-ground element to it. And our hypothesis about what this project was about turned out to really not be right. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Huge.
Because that's what we're doing here is like we don't have all of the answers. And you have to also have an open mind and a willingness to say, that's not really the outcome we anticipated, but this is probably the better solution. And to have the ability to say, okay, we're going to go after that because obviously in retrospect, this is the smart thing to do. And you know, that can be really hard because we're all really smart people. We went to school for a long time and we've been doing this for ages and we think we know everything, but it turns out we don't. So I think it's important to also have some humility about the fact that we're innovating and we're doing things that really have not been done before.
Love that. Shocking conclusion. We might not always be right. No. I love it.
I'll take your question.
Yeah,
now.
go for it.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this, and again, it came up in our prep too, and I think it kind of goes, it's no-brainer. I think it's a couple things. It's leadership, it's innovation, and it's collaboration, right? So, and I'll sort of speak to all 3 of those things, but you know, in terms of at least the filter of Hyosung and thinking about leadership, so the founder of the business, you know, of course he's not there anymore, but the family members really are, and they're deeply embedded. And so, of course, when you have such a large conglomerate and you have to steer this ship, and you have the great responsibility of also ensuring that you're going to be around for another 50 years, right? So, I think certainly leadership at Hyosung thinks a lot about you know, the future of this business, and it's certainly a no-brainer in terms of the climate crisis that we're currently in, and how do we really impact that, and essentially, of course, being a synthetic market provider, where you know we have a critical role to play in that. So really being front and center as innovations are coming on board is a critical piece to that conversation. In terms of innovation, when I say innovation, it's not just about another material with a certification and blockchain or this and that and trying to wave that flag. I mean innovation in terms of also how we're thinking and really having the gumption to test our hypothesis, right? And realize that, okay, this is not the right path. And so I think there is another holistic approach to how do we continue to be in business for another 50 years. So with us, I mean, it's the regen fibers have really been a path towards that. And certainly textile to textile circularity is the North Star. Are we completely there? No, we're not. I think we're, if I'm completely honest, I think we're offering key solutions to brands and retailers that can help them on that journey to complete textile to textile circularity. But they're also evolving in real time, right? So some of the examples that I gave with the recycled nylon that really looks at waste streams and collaborating with other partners that are really experts in that space, and we can take that waste and bring it back into a new material, collaborating with partners like Amber Cycle. Again, they're experts in looking at both post-industrial as well as post-consumer, being able to bring those raw materials and utilizing them into a next life. The next life of recycled polyester content there. So it's a couple different levers in terms of really understanding what do we really do well. And I think that's critically important, because I think that's where the ego gets in the way and we all think like our businesses are the end or be all, but it's really understanding what do we do well in-house and what is our level of expertise and know-how and what is our critical role to play, and then also understanding, who are other innovators in this space that are disrupting the market, thinking differently, and where can we connect those dots. The other piece that's a critical element to this, and it's more of a call to action. It's a bit selfish on my end because I'm constantly reaching to brands and retailers. So I would say it's really about having honest and vulnerable conversations, both from the brand and retail side and from the supply chain end of that, like partners like ourselves. But what I mean by that is, it's critically important to have real business conversations with your supply chain partners. There is no one-stop shop. There is no one-end solution. It's really understanding the roles that each player plays and figuring out how we can collectively connect the dots and collaborate to bring these programs and initiatives to life. So that's my pause there. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that through the rest of our seminars today and tomorrow as well, collaboration is going to play a huge role in all of these conversations. And certainly as the expo, that's kind of one of our goals here too, is to bring so many people together. I think we've got a few more minutes. I was going to ask, I had one more question, I think, for Osa as well, from Oncemore's perspective, just again on this idea of like education, as your company's been around for, I think, around 5 years or so, and you've kind of scaled, what is some kind of like learnings that the audience could take from your experience scaling? And I'll ask you, and then, if Sarah and Tara, if you want to add anything at the end there too. What kind of, last question to you then, everyone, like what can everyone take away from this? What can everyone learn?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we have been producing now for 5 years, as you said, and scaling up during this time as well. And we are planning to scale up even more, of course, but there is the lack of the demand. So we need to boost the demand before doing that. So what we have learned so far and continue to is already talked about that a little bit, but we need to have an agile perspective or look into this, because this is brand new. We learn and things change, as you say, that, oh, okay, this wasn't the best idea. How should we do it instead? And this is something, it's super hard, but you need to do that. So when my team is asking me, so also how does the end-of-life textiles look 2032? It's like, yeah, I will look into my crystal ball and see what that looks like. So you need to be on top of things and need to follow what is happening, both regarding regulations and so on, but also in the space itself. So and the partnerships, of course, that is also super important, across the value chain, different kinds of partners. And I think that you need to also learn when you make a mistake, and that should be like a part of the innovation, because you do make mistakes, and you need to do that to move forward. And I would also just like to add, if there are any, talking about the demand and that we need to boost the demand, we have a solution that is producing right now. So if you're a brand, don't be afraid, just do it. We help you, and we have a lot of different solutions that can help you today, so you don't need to wait. Just do it. It's as easy as that. We will make it easy for you.
I love it.